Hello and welcome to the Friday episode of Stand Up. Joining me today, the Legal Eagle, Eric Segall, Professor Eric Segall, Georgia State University, author of Supreme Myths and the host of the podcast by the same name, joins me. We have a great conversation coming up. I do have a little news update for you. If you want to skip that, Eric and I start at 20 minutes in after the news. Normally, I don't do the news on the Friday show. I host the Hangout and don't have as much time to produce the show, but little extra time before the Hangout tonight. I figure I just read a few headlines, play a few clips, and then get to my conversation with Eric Segall. During the news segment yesterday, I tried something new because I feel like you can't succeed without trying. I can accept failing, but I can't accept not trying, someone once said, or probably a lot of successful people said. So I decided I'd put a little music bed under the news and read these headlines over a little bit of music. I asked if people would let me know if they liked it or not, and the verdict is in. Nobody liked it. Absolutely nobody. Thank you to everybody who got back to me. A couple of you were willing to record your responses, the emails that you sent me about your feelings on the music. And so here first is listener Jack Morocco, who sent this response.
Hi, Pete. Happy New Year, my man. In my humble opinion, the music under the news is distracting. I vote to just get the bad news raw dog. I do not want to be distracted from your velvety delivery of the day's events. Bye for now, Jack Morocco.
Thank you for listening, Jack. Thank you for that frank and succinct email and the kind words. My velvety delivery. I like it. I'll take it. And here's my friend Richard Williams.
Pete, hey, love you, brother. I know how hard you work putting that news segment together, but the music is way too distracting. Takes away from your delivery, which is top-notch, incidentally. Hey, keep up the good work. Greatest podcast in America that not enough people know about.
Thank you, Richard. Very, very kind. You're absolutely right. We're going to fix that in 2024. And finally, Paul Wesley emailed me and said, Pete, I love music more than anyone. I hate background music more than anyone. We're constantly barraged with too many sounds at restaurant stores and wherever. Even TV shows and movies use too much music. It's a distraction from what I'm trying to concentrate on. As a piano tuner, I like to focus on what I'm listening to. I like your voice, and I don't need the soundtrack. Thanks for all you do. Hope to be at the Hangout tonight. I have serious beef with J.L. Covan and his opinion on jazz, and I'm still not happy with Christian Finnegan for dissing Jeff Beck last year. Thanks for your fast reply to my earlier comment. Paul, yeah, see? I get back to many and most of you. Email me, standupwithpete@gmail.com. No music under the news. But here now are your headlines and your sound from Thursday, the 4th of January, 2024. Brought to you by you, the subscriber of this podcast, which is ad-free because of your support. Go to patreon.com/PeteDominic right now to add yours. Okay, well, let's see. Yesterday's headlines. We woke up yesterday to a shooting in a school, an Iowa school. I immediately reached out to a couple of Iowa listeners, Kim and Mark, who are okay, but was not far from where Kim lives. And a 6th grade student was killed at Perry High School in Iowa. 4 other students and a school administrator were injured in this shooting. A teenage student appears to have acted alone and died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound after opening fire. It was the beginning of the second semester for the Perry Community School District following the winter break, and this horrific shooting comes just days before the Iowa caucuses, which kick off the 2024 Republican presidential primary process on January 15th. Will it matter? Sadly, I don't think so for a Republican primary. Yesterday, I mentioned the bombing in Iran. It was a deadly terrorist attack, and the Islamic State has now claimed responsibility. Shortly after the bombing, Iranian leadership blamed Israeli and U.S. for it, but it looks like it was ISIS now claiming responsibility for the bombing attack that killed 84 people at a memorial for the Iranian general who was killed during the Trump administration. More bomb threats. Government buildings across the South received bomb threats on Thursday, the second consecutive day that such warnings prompted serious security measures at government facilities. In Mississippi, multiple bomb threats at various locations across the state prompted officials to take precautionary measures and put in place standard operating emergency procedures. In Arkansas, the Pulaski County Courthouse in Little Rock was forced to evacuate after a bomb threat was received. And local media reports in Florida, Massachusetts, and Maine indicated that similar threats have prompted the evacuations of state and local government buildings in those states. That included a state courthouse in Daytona Beach, the 5th District Court of Appeal, as well as a town and county government offices in Nantucket County, Massachusetts, several courthouses in the Portland, Maine area as well. The fresh wave of threats comes one day after at least 8 state capitol complexes, including ones in Mississippi and Arkansas, were forced to evacuate following bomb threats. So that's just going to become a daily thing now. I hope that they can track down where these threats come from and fully prosecute the people who make them, because it is such a serious, serious crime. But here's some good news. The Biden administration providing $162 million to microchip technology to support domestic production of computer chips, the second funding announcement tied to the 2022 law designed to revive semiconductor manufacturing. Investments like these, of course, make a huge difference. $90 million to improve a plant in Colorado Springs, $72 million to expand a factory in Gresham, Oregon, according to the Commerce Department. And more sentences for Jay Sixers, a member of the Proud Boys extremist group who went on the run after he was convicted in the January 6, 2021 attack on the U.S. Capitol, then allegedly faked a drug overdose after he was caught, was sentenced Thursday to 10 years in prison. His name is Christopher Worrell. He was convicted of assaulting police with pepper spray, was on house arrest when he disappeared in August ahead of his original sentencing date. They got him, and he's going to spend 10 years in prison for it. And this is a big story about Elon Musk being an asshole. The federal labor officials have now accused the company SpaceX on Wednesday of illegally firing 8 employees for circulating a letter critical of the company's founder and chief executive, Elon Musk. According to a complaint issued by a regional office of the National Labor Relations Board, the company fired the employees in 2022 for calling on SpaceX to distance itself from social media comments by Mr. Musk, including one in which he mocked sexual harassment accusations against him. So we will follow that story where it goes. And how about this one? New research, according to a study by French researchers, says that nearly 17,000 people may have died after taking hydroxychloroquine during the first wave of COVID. Of course, former President Trump said about trying it, what do you have to lose? Take it. He said, take it. So did so many other people like Joe Rogan and very many other influential people now. Proof that they have blood on their hands if this study is accurate. Researchers estimated 16,990 people in 6 countries may have died as a result. President Trump once considered it a, quote, miracle cure. I'm not sure how well this study was conducted. A question for our friend Dr. Aaron Carroll, who I haven't talked to in a long time. Maybe Peter Hotez, but still a really serious major headline. If it's anywhere near accurate, it would mean anybody who was saying you should take that shit should lose any credibility they ever have on anything else. And the final headline I want to read to you is, here's the New York Times and other outlets all reporting. House Democrats released evidence that Donald Trump took in at least $7.8 million from foreign entities while in office, engaging in the exact kind of conduct Republicans are grasping to pin on President Biden. The headline, Trump received millions from foreign governments as president, according to this report. The transactions detailed in a 156-page report called White House for Sale that was produced by Democrats on the House Oversight Committee offer concrete evidence that the former president engaged in the kind of conduct that House Republicans have labored so far unsuccessfully to prove that President Biden did as they worked to build an impeachment case against him. How about that? How about that? The actual crime that they are saying Joe Biden committed, and of course he didn't, and there's no evidence of it, or they'd be showing it to us. Turns out that what we knew was happening was happening. Trump actually was making money from foreign governments. And guess what? That's illegal. Using documents produced through a court fight, the report describes how foreign governments and their controlled entities, including a top U.S. adversary, interacted with Trump businesses while he was president. They paid millions to the Trump International Hotel in Washington, D.C., Trump International Hotel in Vegas, Trump Tower on Fifth Avenue in New York, and Trump World Tower, United Nations Plaza in New York City as well. And guess what? The Constitution prohibits federal office holders from accepting money, payments, or gifts of any kind, whatever, foreign governments and monarchs, unless they obtain, quote, the consent of the Congress to do so. The report notes that Mr. Trump never went to Congress to seek consent. Eric Trump is saying this is nonsense, and they donated all of that money to the Treasury Department and has long insisted that foreign interests did not influence his father's presidency and that any profit the company earned stayed with the federal government through a voluntary annual payment to the Treasury Department. Then he put his mouth guard back in. But Jimmy Raskin noted on Thursday that donating profits to the Treasury falls short of the constitutional requirements placed on the president. A lot more detail to this story, but House Republicans, of course, dismissed the revelations, arguing that there was nothing wrong with Mr. Trump receiving revenue from foreign governments while he was president, but that Mr. Biden's family business, that was corrupt. Okay, that is the world that we currently live in. It's tough to deal with. It's tough to argue with these folks, believe these things, and I'll just keep looking for evidence because you don't want to be tribal about these things. You don't want to be partisan about these things. If there is evidence of a crime, show it to us. The bottom line is when you're president, you can't make money off of foreign government investments, and you shouldn't be able to as the member of any federal agency or probably even state agency. So we could talk about that, and I'm sure we'll hear more about it because House Democrats are really trying to make some noise on this and this new document, which you can go read. And, well, here's some good news. I like this headline. Germany's CO2 emissions are at their lowest in 7 decades, according to a new study. Carbon dioxide emissions in Germany, Europe's biggest economy, dropped to their lowest level in 7 decades as the use of coal declined unexpectedly sharply in 2023, and economic pressures weighed down production by energy-intensive industry, according to this new study. Now, Germany has aimed to cut its emissions to net zero by 2045, and they're working to ramp up the use of solar and wind and other renewable sources. The think tank that did this study said its preliminary calculations showed that Germany emitted a decline of 73 million metric tons last year compared with 2022, the lowest level since the 1950s, and that renewable energy sources now accounted for more than half of the country's energy production in 2023. How about that great news from Germany? Which is not always a sentence that you hear. And now, more good news from Germany. I don't know what accent that was. And speaking of good news stories about sustainability, Starbucks has decided to launch a reusable cup option for mobile and drive-through orders. Starbucks customers will now have this option nationwide to accept reusable cups effective immediately. I'm not sure exactly how this is going to work, but I love this offering from Starbucks. The new program comes with financial incentives as well, and this is exactly the type of policy and service places like Starbucks should be offering and should have a long time ago, but better late than never. And that is your headlines. Those are your headlines, I think is what I was supposed to say. But I don't have a script. I don't speak very well. All right, a couple things that I wanted to play for you. First of all, this is Vivek Ramaswamy yesterday when asked by a Washington Post reporter if he condemns white supremacy. This is the answer he gave, and this was so upsetting and frankly scary to me. Basically, what I heard was a brown guy who's an influential person and leader, a guy running for president, saying that the issue of racism is not against people of color, but really, well, you tell me what you hear.
I'm not going to recite some catechism for you. I'm against vicious racial discrimination in this country. So I'm not pledging allegiance to your new religion of modern wokeism, which actually fits the test. I'm not going to bend the knee to your religion. I'm sorry. I'm not asking you to bend the knee to mine, and I'm not going to bend the knee to yours. But do I condemn vicious racial discrimination? Yes, I do. Am I going to play your silly game of gotcha? No, I'm not. And frankly, this is why people have lost trust. And I know you're going to go print the headline tomorrow. I already know this. We already know how your game works. Vivek Ramaswamy refuses to condemn white supremacy because you asked a stupid question. The reality is I condemn vicious racial discrimination in this country, but the kind of vicious and systematic racial discrimination we see today is discrimination on the basis of race in a very different direction. You want to know what the best way is to end discrimination on the basis of race? Stop discriminating on the basis of race. Do that, and we're going to move this country forward. And I don't care whether you're black or white or brown or anything in between. That's how we're going to unite this country. You people have been responsible for dividing this country to a breaking point, creating a projection of national division. I meet people from the south side of Chicago to meetings like this one of every shade of melanin, multiple, from man to woman, doesn't make a difference, who are hungry for reviving unity in this country. And you, with your catechism that you try to get to politicians to whatever fake headline you're going to print on the basis of this conversation tomorrow, that's what's dividing this country to a breaking point. Shame on you. Look people in the eye and tell them what you've actually failed to tell them for the last 5 years. Own the accountability for your own failures as the media. That's how we rebuild trust in this country. And until then, I don't have a lot of patience to play the games.
He is an absolutely despicable person. The way that he talked to that young reporter was his strategy. I get it, and I'm sure she does as well, and hopefully doesn't take it personally, but how could you not? What a terrible person he is, and what a dangerous, dangerous message he is sending, denying the issue of the greatest terrorist threat that we are facing each and every day, especially people of color, but any discriminated against minority, are the top targets for American domestic terrorists, which is the problem. And there he is denying the problem and redirecting it to actually the victims, that the quote victims. And who is it? Luke Zaleski, who I love on Twitter, said, "You'll never convince any MAGA that they are not both the victim and hero in everything. In fact, the core nature of many Trumpers and this absolute absence of self-awareness married to an absolute abundance of self-centeredness. A boundless, overconfident, belligerent expression of id." Oh, man, that guy is good with his words. But yeah, very, very well said about the horror show that is Vivek Ramaswamy and the messenger that he has become. He will definitely not probably win anywhere, any state, but he will be, I think, continue to be a really influential presence in media. I can't wait for his YouTube or podcast show, or maybe they'll even put him on network. Maybe Fox will give him a gig or somebody else. But you can almost guarantee that's where he's going to be making his living in the future. Spinning lies, dividing people, doing exactly what he is saying that Washington Post reporter is guilty of course, is how he will and has been making a living. So looking forward to more of him. Yeah. All right. And now some of you made mention of this tear from our friend Dr. Jason Johnson, who was on MSNBC yesterday, and he talked about the fact that America is where it is and that we are arguing whether or not Trump should be able to be on the ballot. Anyway, this 2-minute rant is real fire from Jason.
Every single person who voted against trying to impeach Donald Trump is basically somebody who was aiding and providing comfort to January 6th. But this is, you asked us to sort of look at this from 1,000 miles away. Mm-hmm. Yep. This is the biggest concern. The fact that we have to have this mad scramble for all these individual states and all these individual activists to organize themselves, to put themselves in danger, to stop this man who tried to violently take over the country. I am sick and tired of people saying, well, we've got guardrails. We don't have guardrails. If we had guardrails, this would be done already. Our guardrails are made of SpaghettiOs and silly string, right? Because the fact that he could be on the ballot in so many places and he gets to go to a Supreme Court where a third of that court are people that Trump put in, and then you have other people who we know are absolutely compromised by the same donors that give to Donald Trump. This is a joke. And I've mentioned this example before, Alicia. The fact that you had an insurrection by Bolsonaro, South America's Trump in Brazil. He had an insurrection on January 8th of 2023, and by July of 2023, the Brazilian Supreme Court was like, yeah, this guy can't run again for 10 years. We've had 3 years of this. We're coming up on a 3-year anniversary of a terrorist attack, and we're fumbling around with individual states as to what font Trump can use when he runs for office again after he declares he wants to be a dictator. This is a massive failure. And if there's one thing that their federal government should be talking about on a regular basis, is how this is dangerous, and they should be much more active and organized at stopping this. This shouldn't be on the hands of individual states. This should be the number one priority of our federal government, and they should stop at nothing to keep this man from endangering this country again. And I don't feel that they've been passionate enough or serious enough about solving this problem.
Well, there you go. Dr. Jason Johnson. Got to get him back on real soon. That was real good. I only hope I can come anywhere close to a rant like that. And one of my 2 appearances tonight, you can be watching me on both News Nation on Dan Abrams' show. I'm on panel. And on MSNBC, it's the 11th hour with Stephanie Ruhle. I'll be on there as well tonight at 11 East, along with Dr. Eddie Glaude. Professor Glaude from Princeton will be on panel. Really excited about both of those appearances. If you want to see what it looks like to actually embody imposter syndrome, watch me sitting next to Professor Eddie Glaude of Princeton on MSNBC tonight. All right, now let's get to my guest today here on the Friday show. Hope you appreciated the bonus news segment brought to you by you, the subscriber. But right now we've got one of the smartest, one of the best constitutional law scholars in the country, one of the most respected now. We talked a little bit about how much respect he has earned, how much credibility he has received over the past few years, especially, of course, his first book, Supreme Myths. why the Supreme Court is not a court and its justices are not judges is still very, very important. We talked a little bit about how proud he is of that book. He's written a subsequent Originalism as Faith, and you can listen to his podcast, Supreme Myths. You can find him on social media, on TikTok and Twitter especially, and you can always reach out and contact him or ask him a question through me if you don't have that information. Always great when he joins me. We covered a lot of ground. We talked about a couple of issues in the news, which we don't always do. I wanted to get his take on, and much, much more. So without further ado, it's time for the Legal Eagle, Eric Segall.
There he is, freshly back from Paris and now on the way to D.C. He is such a world traveler, and we're so happy that we get him for a few minutes. Eric Segall, how was your trip, your family trip to France?
It was, we had to go for a very short period of time. We had to do something because we were supposed to go to Japan for 2 weeks in June. I couldn't go because of health reasons. So those credits were expiring. I think other Delta people know how this goes. So we had to go. We went with my two teenagers. Jesse, my 32-year-old, was not able to come. We had the best time ever. It was the best time ever. It was fabulous. Being out of America was fabulous. Walking the streets of Paris was fabulous. Watching my teenagers be wild-eyed.
What were your teenagers' interests in France?
So before we went, we had kind of a plan. We were going to see a lot of neighborhoods because we like neighborhoods. The Eiffel Tower, both inside during the day and at night, was imperative, and we did that. The Eiffel Tower at night is really something. We were going to go to the Pompidou Hotel of Modern Art, which I love, and my kids expressed an interest in going, which I was excited about. Pete, this is funny. I did put it on Twitter. So we're all excited about it. Lynn buys tickets the night before online for the next day. And we show up after taking 3 different subways, and there's no one outside of it. And that was weird to me because I know it's a very popular museum during the Christmas holidays. We go up to the front door, and it says, closed due to strike. That was announced that morning.
I did see that.
And I thought, well, that's not very nice. But anyway, we had a great time. Pete, the food there.
You were mad at those who organized for better conditions? Is that what I heard?
I was teasing. I was saying socialism at work, but I was teasing. Actually, interesting story about that. Mild digression. In 1977, when I was 19 years old, a friend and I went to England, Brighton, England, to work for the summer in a mailroom. And it was a great experience for me. We worked for 3 months, and it was just great. But we got there, and I was told that just 3 days ago, a 6-month strike had ended that had basically stopped power in England for 6 months. And I remember thinking in 1977 as a college punk, that wouldn't happen in America.
It stopped what? It stopped power?
In other words, however power was generated in England in 1977, they went...
Electricity.
Yeah, coal, I think. Whatever it was. They went on strike. Yeah. So they were rolling blackouts and people didn't have electricity and all this stuff. And I said to the people in the mailroom, some of whom were blue collar, but some of whom were white collar and highly educated. And I said, this would never happen in America. Like, we wouldn't let this happen. This wouldn't happen. And they said, yeah, because you guys suck and don't believe in workers' rights. And I said, yes. And that was 1977. Anyway.
Oh, that is an interesting departure and anecdote. Yeah. And I gotta love to hear the foreign perspective on our.
By the way, one more thing about that. All right. So my dad worked for American Express. He helped us get those jobs in the mailroom in Brighton. And my dad's last name is Segall, of course. And the first day we walk into the mailroom, and I didn't want anyone to know how we got the job. I didn't want anyone to know
you were a nepo baby.
I was a nepo baby, and I wanted to be anonymous. And I walk into the room, and like 10 minutes, and they're showing me around, and giving me a badge. And then they start yelling, Segall, Segall. I'm like, what the fuck is this? And then I learned that the Brighton football team, soccer team, is the Brighton Seagulls. And they did that chant like every day. And it was very weird to sit there, Segall, like, yes, me, I'm here. I'm right. Anyway.
That's good. Good stuff. Well, I'm glad you're back and very happy to have you joining me. There's a bunch of things I wanted to talk about. I realize we don't talk as much about news these days, and I always want to get your thoughts on any number of different issues. So there's 2 things that I want to ask you first, which are not specifically related to the Supreme Court or your specialty or expertise with constitutional law, but I want to ask you your thoughts about you being an academic, your thoughts about what happened at Harvard and your thoughts around the resignation of the first black and first female president of Harvard, the shortest tenure any president has ever had. So the right now are saying she was never even qualified for the job, which a lot of people are saying is very very base in racism, and of course that she is. I wonder what your thoughts are about her qualifications, the plagiarism scandal, and how much of this is made up by a right-wing troll who's been very effective, Christopher Rufo, and the media's, handling of it all. Any thoughts around it at all?
And not just Rufo. I think Bill Ackerman, is that his name? I think he's also been somewhat involved in all this billionaire.
Yeah, he's a heavy former Harvard. Yeah. People should look him up, but he's been a player and he's been funny. He's got a lot of money. He's got a lot of power. But yeah.
So I want to answer your question.
He seems like a real piece of shit, I would argue as well.
Yes, he does. I want to answer your question, but first I do want to do a qualifier, which is this. As far as I know, I am one of only one or two progressive law professors who publicly on Twitter and elsewhere has said very openly and very clearly that in our world, I can't speak to science and college, but in law schools, it is 80% liberal, 20% conservative. It's a real problem. Political correctness is a real problem. And one of the reasons the Federalist Society has been so successful, Pete, is because those students have no place else to go in legal academia. So part of my take on this is biased by my take on my profession, which is hopelessly imbalanced and horribly so. And I admit that all the time. And I, just as an example, and I love my law school. I'm going to retire at my law school. I've been there 33 years. We do great things. I can't get them to hire a conservative law professor in my area, in con law. And it's really frustrating. So that bias exists. That bias, and I say I can't get them. I've been unsuccessful so far in convincing them of the importance of that idea. So, and that's frustrating to me. So I think that's also true in liberal arts. I would be shocked if it wasn't. So the right wants to go after this entire system. And she was a victim of that. As far as I can tell, her plagiarism wasn't the kind of plagiarism that should get somebody fired. And if it is, then Neil Gorsuch has to resign because, as Politico reported, his plagiarism was just as bad as hers. And frankly, it's much more important for a Supreme Court justice to have honor and integrity than the president of Harvard. So, I think that that this wasn't about plagiarism. It was about the attack on elite liberal education. That is sad. There's a strong element of racism here, although the white president of Stanford had to resign, right? Different reasons, but the same thing, because of that stupid hearing.
I think you meant Penn, not...
I'm sorry, Penn.
Yeah,
right.
Liz McGill is her name, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, she had to resign too.
Yeah.
I'm scared, Pete.
Well, just to be clear, I just want to say, you think the bigger issue here is that academia is overwhelmingly progressive and that you see an issue in that because there's not a diversity of ideology. But more importantly, you're saying the strategy here is that the right is going after academia because it is a institution in America that is overwhelmingly progressive.
Well, the right isn't monolithic on this. I mean, for example, Randy Barnett, who, he and I disagree about almost everything and have for years, he often points out that I've conceded the point that he makes all the time, that in the legal world, in fact, the conference I'm going to tomorrow is supposed to be an all-inclusive 1,000-person conference, but it's so liberal and so progressive that the Federalist Society has a conference that goes side by side with it separately. I don't blame them because the panels are usually 4 liberals and a conservative, 5 liberals. Okay, but my point here is different, Pete. My point here is the right wing is going after elite liberal education for a lot of different reasons. Some out of just intellectual dislike, which I think is probably a big part of it. But another part of it is the Trumpians who are doing this. They just want chaos. I've been trying to say this to you now since at least 2 years. What Trump wants is as much chaos as humanly possible because, and this is a serious point, I hate to throw it in here, he's going to take power either by winning fairly or through force. That's his plan. And the more chaos, the more of a chance he can take it through force. There's a corner of this that's about that. Just sow chaos in the institutions. Any institution dominated by liberals, which Harvard definitely is, which Penn definitely is, any institution dominated by liberals, destroy it, muck it up.
Yeah, I fully agree. I think that Steve Bannon openly said what you describe as making everything chaotic, flooding it. They call it flooding the zone with shit. That's the strategy. Right. Yeah. And it's been very effective. And I think what you mean more specifically here with this is what Rufo has said following that playbook. Just come up with terminology like DEI and critical race theory and say everything is that and that is bad. And that is exactly what they are doing. And that then creates chaos and floods the zone with shit that people get really confused about what the hell is happening, including in my own school, where I, as you know, have been in the fight with these people about these very things.
Right. No, we're really in a precarious position. And I will say this, and, you know, the liberals will get mad at me for this and have in the past. Part of this is making it. I consider myself progressive. So part of this is progressives making their own bed in a very bad way. Progressives have not been open to conservative debate as openly as conservatives are open to debate. And it's a real problem. And in hiring committees, Pete, in law, I can only speak to law schools. I cannot.
You're talking about this is a problem specifically in law schools, and that your diagnosis, your
not just law schools. It's a problem in elite liberal education.
The progressives won't debate conservatives.
No, what I'm saying is we don't hire them. So we can't debate them.
Yeah.
We debate them when they come in.
I will say this. The point is slightly irking me simply, and I have no idea what I'm talking about. But I feel like you may be using the word conservative to describe a type of person who is an endangered species. And because I now don't use that word anymore because I don't know what it means, liberal conservative. I'm Earth 1, Earth 2.
I agree. What
Vaccines,
I'm saying is,
climate change, and democracy. And then do we hire somebody who's anti-vax and anti-science and anti-democracy?
No, but 5 years ago, 3 years ago.
And anti-voting rights?
Let me finish this. 3, 5, and 10 years ago, unless you were a Supreme Court clerk. If you're a Supreme Court clerk, everything is different. But unless you were a Supreme, which almost no one is, unless you were a clerk, if you went into a law school and said Roe and Casey are wrong, they should be overturned, abortion should be returned to the states, and I think the fetus is a human being deserving of constitutional protection, you would not get hired by 95% of American law schools, no matter your credentials. No matter your credentials. And actually, we have a kind of a case study in that. A friend
and you
of mine,
think that point of view should be presented in law schools by legal scholars?
It's legitimate. It's my point of view. to some degree, Roe and Casey were wrongly decided. I think 30 years from now, if we're still alive, and you're still
but that's not a rebuttal to my point about Earth 1 and Earth 2.
What I'm saying to you is, okay, look.
There aren't enough conservatives.
That congressional hearing was a travesty. It was awful. The fallout has been wrong. I believe it was probably planned this way.
Claudine Gay, that congressional hearing,
And the woman from Penn, who they all said the right things legally, and then they got all the shit for it. So I don't know. They're clearly attacking her because she's black and the president of Harvard. However, their attacks would be harder if we could, with a straight face, say higher education in this country is a reasonable mix of left and right. It is not a reasonable mix.
Okay, well, that's fair enough. I think that's more than fair enough. But I would also just add the attacks are so much easier against women and black people, 100%, especially 100%. Black women. Like, who's standing up for black women? And you look around the cultural landscape from media to institutions to politics, and there's not a lot of people standing up for her in this case. And I think that is very emblematic of America's reaction when a black woman is being persecuted like this.
Her letter, I thought, was excellent. The resignation.
You did? Okay. I got to go read it in full. I read excerpts.
Yeah, I thought it was excellent. The whole thing was sad.
Yeah.
Frankly, everything that started with that hearing and the fallout from that hearing is sad. It's 90% the fault of the right, but there is some fault on the left.
I appreciate that. No, I do appreciate everything that you said. It's not a point of view I know you've presented that before, but as a problem here. So let's ask another question, another topic, which is sports talk.
I love this topic.
I know you do. You're always been a great fan and connoisseur and performer of radio and live radio, and your opinions matter. Normally, I don't talk sports, and this isn't really sports or sports talk, but listen, I hate Aaron Rodgers. The anti-vax movement, I think, is one of the most dangerous. He's one of the leaders. And now he went on this Pat McAfee show, which is an ESPN program, and he basically said that when the Epstein list comes out, he wouldn't be surprised if Jimmy Kimmel's name was on it. Jimmy Kimmel didn't much like that. It's obviously a complete whole lie, and there's no insinuation.
I don't know if it's a lie, but if it's untrue, it's definitely slander.
Well, there's nothing that insinuates that Jimmy Kimmel has ever been. I mean, no, he just made it up just to be a jerk to Jimmy Kimmel.
I'm just saying I don't know.
Jimmy Kimmel then, tweeted, "I'll take legal action." That's defamation, basically.
By the way, Kimmel did not. So I'm going to plug
and then
the show.
Finally, and then I'll just shut up for 5 minutes. And Finally, the thing that's interesting is the Pat McAfee show is on the ABC, is in a Disney World. It's ESPN and ABC, Jimmy Kimmel. Yeah. So basically you had one show's guest attacking one of their biggest moneymakers. And the jokes were that the CEO, Bob Iger, spanked Pat McAfee for allowing stupid Aaron Rodgers to say that so hard he had to put sleeves on because he always wears a sleeveless shirt. Now I'm basically done setting up the situation.
As of 1:30 p.m. on Thursday when we're taping this, I do not think Bob Iger has taken the action you just joked.
Oh, I don't think there's any proof that he did. Maybe somebody at ABC said, hey, don't, but maybe Kimmel, I'm guessing Kimmel called his boss and said, make this stop.
Right. So my information from this comes from being my perspectives on this. I want to do my credentials first.
Yes.
I grew up listening to sports talk radio in New York when it was at its very best with John Sterling and other people. I think that's why I'm not terrible on radio, because when I was 10, 11, 12, and 13.
Oh, it's definitely why. Why.
I was listening to John Sterling do his thing, and he was great. And it was so all right. And I'm a huge sports fan, and I've written about sports. I've written about sports for the Huffington Post. I've written about sports for Dorf on Law. So I'm not an expert, but I'm not a novice. I know a lot about this. In addition, I'm a religious listener to what used to be the Dan Le Batard Show with Stu Gatz on ESPN, but is now the Dan Le Batard Show with Stu Gatz podcast, which is, I think, the best podcast other than yours, probably in the world right now. And it is sports and satire and culture. As of today, they made some points, and they had Jamel Hill on it. You know Jamel, I think, who was fired by ESPN for making very honest statements about race years ago.
Black woman.
Yeah, black women, very smart and all that. Their take on all of this is my take, which is all very interesting, which is if you're Disney, you're up Schitt's Creek because they've paid Pat McAfee $1 bazillion. And he's incredibly popular. And he's incredibly popular with college football fans, which makes him incredibly valuable because that's the demographic, I understand, that spends money and that they want all that stuff. My understanding from the Le Batard show is that, and I've heard it from other places too, McAfee paid Aaron Rodgers out of his pocket. ABC and ESPN and Disney did not pay Aaron Rodgers. McAfee paid him millions out of his own pocket to be on the show, so the McAfee show would be bigger. That's an interesting twist to all this, too. Finally, I will say that Aaron Rodgers did this ayahuasca drug thing that everybody talked about. But actually, that thing is becoming a serious, is a serious thing for people with mental illness. So I don't want to make fun of that thing. But he came out of it bizarrely and crazily. But here's the real point I wanted to make. So the McAfee show, I love sports. I can't watch it because it's too busy. There's 17 scores going on the TV. He's talking about 10 different subjects. He brings in 5 guests. It's manic energy. It's like me talking about, court's not a court. It's just manic energy all the time in your face. I can't do it. I'm too old. But he's the future. And that's really sad because the best sports show ever on television, in my opinion, Bryant Gumbel's HBO Sports, which did 15-minute or 20-minute, sometimes 50-minute, thorough, intellectual, smart documentaries, not bought and sold by anybody like ESPN or anybody else. Yeah. That show went off the air for 29 years. They couldn't even make it to 30 in December. And the idea that McAfee is the hottest, he and Stephen A. Smith are the hottest things in sports talk, and all they do is yell and scream and yell and scream and yell and scream, while Bryant Gumbel's very thoughtful show is going off the air, is in fact a reflection of America, as sports so often is in fact a reflection of America today. We want everything in 1 minute, the second after it happens, strong opinions, screaming, yelling, fighting.
Yeah. And hopefully
going back to John Sterling in 1975 doing radio on The Fan, I think, I don't know where, I forget the station, but one of the big stations in New York. He made fun of people. He treated some of his guests poorly, but he did it in a way where you knew it was sports and it wasn't that important. It was just sports and it was fun. And he had the right timing on that. That's all changed. Now it's just screaming and yelling. I mean, Stephen A. Smith is I think, the number one person in sports in the world right now, leaving aside soccer people. And all he does is scream and yell. And he's a smart guy, but he screams and yells.
Yeah.
So I'm sad about this whole thing. As to Aaron Rodgers, he is a fucking dick who needs to go away because he has a lot of fans, and what he says is dangerous and harmful. And and I think the tell here, the number one tell of this whole story, is Jimmy Kimmel did not respond to this with a joke, which is his normal. That's what he would normally.
Yeah.
If somebody famous said, that Jimmy Kimmel, he's really boring and dull, I don't like him, Kimmel would respond with humor to that.
Or something even more serious, but when he accused him of basically being pedophile adjacent or a pedophile, that's what Aaron Rodgers said. And I don't know what their history is. Maybe they've, I'm sure Jimmy Kimmel's made a lot of jokes about him, but so has everybody. Right. But the point is, Jimmy Kimmel responded with cease and desist, basically, asshole.
Oh, he said, I'm taking you to court, and he will, by the way, and he'll win. And he'll win.
Well, hold up on that, just real quick. It doesn't get to court, right? Because Aaron Rodgers makes a public statement saying there's nothing. I apologize. There's nothing that says and then it's over.
So I want to say that my perception of both men. If
he did that, could Jimmy Kimmel still sue for some kind of damages in this case? Because you made some people think I'm the worst type of person.
Right. Even if he apologized, I think Kimmel could still sue for slander, but the damages would be less. The damages would be less. But that's not. But I think the more important point here is neither Aaron Rodgers nor Pat McAfee are the apologizing type. Pat McAfee has told his audience from the beginning, "I will not change." The reason I brought up Dan Le Batard is he was chased out of ESPN for his political. He wanted to talk politics as much as sports, and they wouldn't let him do it. McAfee's contract is different, and I think they hired him. Do what you want. Just get good ratings.
Yeah.
Do what you want. Get good ratings. I don't think either one of them is going to apologize. If Rodgers doesn't apologize, Kimmel should sue him. Now, remember, you'd have to show malice, actual malice, because Jimmy Kimmel's a public figure, obviously. And this goes to something I want to say, Pete. In 1959 America, if a public figure or public official, those are different things. Tom Cruise, Aaron Rodgers are public figures. Bill Clinton's a public figure. In 1959 America, you could slander or libel a public official or public figure, and state law would determine what the proof would be. In New York Times versus Sullivan, which Clarence Thomas wants to reverse, and he's the only one who wants to reverse it, except for maybe me, they held in a case that had to come out the way it did, that if a public figure sues you for defamation, they have to show you acted with actual malice, which means either you knew it was false or it was a reckless disregard for the truth. Aaron Rodgers' defense might well be, I'm so stupid that I may have been negligent, but I wasn't reckless and I wasn't intentional. I want to say, Pete, that rule of law is terrible.
You and Clarence Thomas agree and everybody else doesn't?
Listen, if I own an internet site and I say Tom Cruise has had 6 affairs with 3 men and 3 women outside of his marriage.
You sure are hung up on that example.
And committed infidelity. In England, you don't have to show actual malice. Here you do. You shouldn't have to. Tom Cruise, I agree that government officials we have to be able to criticize government officials with breathing room. That's part of democracy. And if I say Bill Clinton had sex with 9 women, not just Paula Jones, you have to show I acted with actual malice, and I'm fine with that. Tom Cruise is not Bill Clinton. Aaron Rodgers is not Bill Clinton or any other government official. And that's just the court making shit up.
Okay, now, well, what do you think? What should the law be? If I say,
I want to make a bigger point, Pete.
Yeah.
I'm not an expert on this. I've studied it. I've taught it. But I want to say reasonable people can absolutely disagree with what I just said and say, no, Segall, you're wrong. We have to protect free speech. Tom Cruise shouldn't be able to sue unless there's absolute. But this is what I want to say. When the Supreme Court held that in 1963 or 4, I forget which year, there's nothing in the text, nothing in the history, nothing in law to support.
There it is.
That's a rule that most people like, but it's like one person, one vote. Pete, I love one person, one vote. It is the right rule for a democracy. The Senate doesn't have it, by the way, right? The Senate's not one person, one vote. But for states, they have to be one person, one vote. But that also is a made-up value judgment by 5 people sitting in D.C. I just don't want to lose sight of that. No, I like that rule. But it's not law. None of this is law. Okay?
All right, fair enough. Now let's continue with the law and ask you about another big hot topic. And, I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about this because I feel like we're going to have a decision soon. I do think that a lot of people are doing great examinations on this and what's happened, but these constitutional law scholars they write this whole, what is it called, paper, stating law review article that says Trump is ineligible because he led an insurrection or was involved in an insurrection. He's an officer of the United States. He can't be president again. A bunch of states sue. People know the news at this point. And the point is, do we really need to discuss this? Because the Supreme Court's going to make a decision. And a lot of people who don't always agree with you think that you, Eric Segall, have made the call as to what they are going to decide. So when would this happen? And am I right that we probably don't need to belabor it that much because the Supreme Court's going to decide, and it's going to be what?
Well, no, we need to belabor this because this is unconscionably important.
Okay.
This might be this along with Citizens United, affirmative action, guns and abortion is the most important thing to happen to our country in the Supreme Court in my lifetime.
However, the Supreme Court decides on this issue because they're going to either invalidate or validate him.
So Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, enacted after the Civil War, says that if you took an oath to uphold the Constitution, meaning you're a government official for local, state, or federal entity, and you engaged in an insurrection, you are not allowed to hold office again. Just like if you're not 35, you can't be president. If you're not a resident of your state, you can't be in the House, and so on and so forth. Now, this qualification is different because we know what age is. We know what's, leaving aside Donald Trump and Obama, we know what citizenship is. We know what residence is. We know what natural-born citizen is. We don't know what insurrection is. We know some things are insurrections. We know some things aren't insurrections. But there's a big middle we don't know. All right. There's a normative and a descriptive. Descriptively, what you're asking me is, I think what the court is going to say, there's 10 different legal ways for Trump to lose. He has to lose on like 8 different issues, all of which are very difficult. I won't go in them right now. I'm sure your audience has heard them. Is the president an officer of the United States? Was this really an insurrection? Was this provision meant to apply beyond the Civil War? All kinds of legal issues like that.
Can that first question be debated? Is the president an officer of the United States?
That was the holding of the trial court in Colorado. The judge already ruled that.
But can it be? How could anybody ever refer to the
Section 3 says the following people will be disqualified, and it lists Congress, Senate. It doesn't list the president or vice president. However, my friend and historian Mark Graber, University of Maryland, who I think is the best person on this issue, there is no ambiguity about the history. Of course, the president is an officer of the United States for these purposes. But you know what else is also true, Pete? And this is what I keep telling people on Twitter, and they don't believe me. So let's just say you're right. People can't see you, but the look you gave me, of course the president is an officer. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Yes, that is correct.
Right.
The 11th Amendment to the United States Constitution says, I'm paraphrasing, no state can be sued by a citizen of another state. Is that ambiguous to you?
No.
No. The Supreme Court has said the word another means the same. And a citizen of Georgia can't sue Georgia under a provision that says a state can't be sued by another state. Pete, equal state sovereignty.
Well, that person was suing Georgia. They lived in Georgia and they were suing Georgia, your example. I think you misspoke.
The word another suggests that only lawsuits brought by a citizen of another state are barred, but the Supreme Court has held citizens of the same state are barred as well, even though the word another is not imprecise.
Oh.
It's not like due process. It's not equal protection. We know what the word another means. It means not this one.
I'm the worst law student listener.
And the court held it meant this one. It's unbelievable. And just one more example. I can't get this one out very easily. But in Shelby County, the court held that there's a principle that Congress cannot treat different states differently, absent a very strong reason when Congress acts under its power, under the Reconstruction Amendments. The Reconstruction Amendments were everything about bringing the South in under the conditions that they don't do what they did anymore. So if the Supreme Court can do those two things, both of which are on the front page of the New York Times, they can do anything in this case. There's nothing legally out of bounds in this case.
So they could keep him on. They could invalidate him.
And let me tell you what they're going to do.
Yeah.
And by the way, leading election law, I am not a leading election law expert. Rick Hasen is. Ned Foley of Ohio State is. I'm leaving out like 4 other people who should be named. But there are like 5 leading election law experts. All of them are saying the same thing. The number one thing is for the court to rule quickly. Now, they all have opinions what the court should do, But more important than what the court should do, it has to be done like the next 2 months. Otherwise, our election is going to be fucked up beyond imagination.
Okay.
Rick has taken the strongest position on that. I trust Rick on these issues. I think he's right. What they're going to do is they're going, and when I put this on Twitter, people are like, you're right, but how can they do that? And I'm like, well, how can they say another means the same? They are going, which they did, and we steal the law. What they're going to say, I think, is this is the best prediction I have. They're going to say that although the 14th Amendment in general doesn't need congressional action to make it effective, because it says no state shall deny to any person due process, equal protection of the law. You don't need a statute but for Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, you need Congress to pass a law implementing it. And the reason I think they're going to do, which Congress can't do because of the filibuster. So I think what that does is, A, resolves the issue once and for all. It's all gone now. If Congress has to pass a law to implement it, no state can disqualify. So that takes it off the table. That's A. B, they don't have to discuss whether he engaged in an insurrection. And they don't want to do that. They're not going to want to have that discussion. That's 2. 3, there are many legal ways to get rid of this case that would only apply to federal court. And the election law experts are saying, don't do that. It's just going to push everything to state court and create chaos. This, however, the meaning of the Section 3 of the 14th Amendment is that it does not apply unless Congress passes a law, or maybe it doesn't apply to the president unless Congress passes a law. Means no state can do anything either about it. And they get rid of it all in one fell blow. And the reason I think they're going to do that is I don't see a world where they disqualify. Right. There's no world where they disqualify. But Pete, I could be wrong about that if, and this is what I want your audience to understand. This is the most important point. Sheldon Whitehouse would give me a standing ovation for what I'm about to say. Since 2006, when Roberts and Alito came on the court, Whitehouse would say the number is 99%. The number is actually 92 or 3%. But in 92 or 93% of all election law cases that raise election law issues, the Republicans win all the time. They win all the time. They lost one case in Alabama. And they lost one. Wait, let me finish this thought.
Yeah.
There's a world where Roberts and Kavanaugh, along with the 3 liberals, and maybe Gorsuch, hate Trump so much and want him gone so much and think that Nikki Haley or DeSantis will beat Biden easily. And I think they're right about that, where they get rid of Trump. But if they do that, Pete, it is only to help the Republican Party. In other words, they're not going behind closed doors to debate, is the president an officer?
Right.
Did he engage in insurrection? That's what they're going to pretend to talk about. But what they're really thinking, and I'm sure of this, is what's in the best interest of the Republican Party.
Right, exactly. But when you say that 90-some% of these cases that dealt with election law, they come down on the side of Republicans, and that's why you think that the point is this was first brought as a law article by Republicans, and this is still, as you describe it, would be a win for Republicans, even more likely, because one might argue, and this is what you're saying, that if they decide to invalidate Trump, it's because those Republicans, think that any other Republican has a better chance of beating Joe Biden and having a Republican president. Is that what I'm hearing?
Exactly, but with one headline missing. There is only one thing that the conservatives on the court and the liberals on the court for the Democratic Party, it's only one thing they care more about than party allegiance, maybe 2 things. Their own personal legacies, of course, because we all do. And that's fair. I'm not crazy. But they care about the legacy of the court, and they care about the court's reputation.
Well,
And wait. Let me finish the thought. I don't think they can disqualify Trump, which means they're going to alienate 30% or so of America, which is roughly 80 or 90% of the Republican Party. How do they alienate 80% of the Republican Party's base? That's
because what the question is, that I thought you were going that direction. The conservatives in the court don't want to alienate the Republican base, which most Republicans or people identify as conservative. Because why? Because of their legacy, because of the threat to their power, because of what are you saying? Why wouldn't they?
Well, I think if they were to, I guess there's a world where they disqualify Trump. Trump runs as a third party, and then Republicans can't win.
That is probably the most important point here, and I'm surprised neither of us made it first. But yeah.
Yeah, but it's not that may be the biggest thing, but there's other things too, Pete. If you take away Trump's support from the Republican Party today, the Republican Party's dead. So, I mean, Democrats have this more. Well,
hold on a second. If he runs as a third-party candidate, he still can't be on the ballot of several states, so he still can't get the amount of electoral votes.
No, what I mean is, in their thinking of this, do we want him on the ballot or not? If we disqualify him, that gives Nikki Haley a better chance.
Yeah, it would split on the states he was on, the red states. Yeah. It would split. Yeah. Right, got it. Yeah. Of course. Yeah. I'm sorry, I had to work that out.
But Pete, I want to do one disclaimer. So everything I just said is something that if you had an expert political scientist on, they would be talking about. I'm one of the few law professors in the country who will talk about this as it should be talked about. I'm not an expert in, as you know, I'm not a political scientist expert like that. But I do want to say one thing I'm sure, and it's really sad. They will take the best interests of the Republican Party to heart, and whatever that means, and that's too unpredictable in this case to know, but they will pretend they're not doing that. And that's a horrible thing.
Well, what about, though, the question of recusal, especially for Clarence Thomas, whose wife was implicated in the insurrection, and he shouldn't be deciding? Is that worthy of a...
That also has many layers to it.
It does.
First of all, if there are 5 votes not to disqualify Trump, then Thomas loses nothing by recusing. So we have to wait and see how that plays out. Let's be clear about this. And I wrote this in the LA Times in 2012. Let's not expect Justice Thomas to do the right thing. That's never going to happen.
Right.
That's just never going to.
Right.
He does the right thing when he treats his staff well. That's it. There's nothing else he does. That's the right thing. So it'll be a political calculation on his part. Pete, I think it might, in his view, embarrass his wife if he recuses, and I'm not sure he wants to do that. That's the reason he should recuse, by the way, because if that's going through your head.
No, that's what I was going to say. He's going to be implicating his wife if he did recuse. By the way, when you say he treats his staff well, that's his reputation. Would you think Anita Hill would say that?
What I mean by that is once he became a Supreme Court justice.
Okay, once he became a Supreme Court justice, he stopped sexually harassing his clerks?
You're not really trying to get me to start my tirade about Justice Clarence Thomas.
Okay, no, I want to get you in a good place in a little bit because you're going to this legal conference in D.C. tonight after we talk here. And my question to you is, you have helped me book almost any con law guest or person within that world as I want because I just drop your name. The point being, the question is, when you get together with constitutional law professors or in general, what is, and don't be modest, your level of name recognition? Because my experience in tossing your name around, as I do liberally, is either at worst, I'm familiar with him, or at worst, I'm familiar with him and I hate him. But at best, people will be like, oh, I love him. And you have gained more and more credibility with your kind of thesis and scholarship, I think, over your career, especially these, since I put you on the map.
Absolutely, since you put me on the map.
No one at these conferences would know you without me, is what I'm trying to say.
That's likely true. By the way, so the panel I'm on is discussion. It's an incredibly important topic. How do we teach the role of precedent to our students in a world where everything has changed in the last 3 years?
How do we teach the role of precedent in constitutional law
when everything has changed in the last 5 years? Abortion, affirmative action, free speech, religion, it's all changed. Now, my view is it's always been like that. But the panelists, there are 2 kind of moderators, leaving aside the moderators. The panelists are from Harvard, Virginia, Texas, Duke, and Georgia State.
Wow, look at you.
And I'll answer your question honestly. Because I just said to my wife 2 days ago, Pete, something changed about 2 years ago. And I don't know what it is. Circa 2020, I think I had a decent to good reputation nationally among con law professors and among non-con law professors because of my court's not a court thing. I have some recognition, not that much. You put me in the media world. Dahlia Lithwick helped me a lot in the media world. But the really famous professors didn't like my work because in my book, I said, one of the reasons con law professors won't accept my thesis is because it infringes on their turf. If abortion and gun control and campaign finance reform and separation of powers and federalism, all those issues really should be decided by states, not by the 5 lawyers sitting in Washington, D.C., then con law professors will have much less to talk about, and they don't want that. And I knew that would make people mad, and it did, and it made people mad. But somewhere around 2 years ago, I think there was a meeting of some kind, and the elite of the elite, the Harvards, the Yales, the Stanfords, they decided to like me, and that's why I'm on this panel. It's the only reason I'm on this panel. I don't know what happened. It was a deep change. I think it might have been Dobbs to some degree, a little bit, because, I've been predicting this for a long time.
Yeah, it had to be. It had to be, at least in large degree. What else could it have been that put you?
Because you have to understand how elitist my profession is. So this conference I think I do. I mean, it's incredibly elitist. And so I think you do. I wrote an article with a math expert, a data expert in 2020, which showed of the top 20 ranked U.S. news law schools, 98% of the professors went to a top 10 law school. And so I'll say that again. Take the top 20 U.S. news law schools, figure 30 to 40 to 50 faculty members of each school. That's like 1,000 people. 98% went to a top 10, and 50% went to Harvard or Yale. 50% went to Harvard or Yale. So to make a name for oneself in my field from Georgia State or from Case Western or from University of Florida, wherever, is a very difficult thing to do. Without the internet, it never happens for me. It just doesn't. There's no.
So you're giving a lot of credit now to TikTok. You exploded on TikTok.
Not
Maybe
TikTok,
that's why there are all these serious hoity-toities are taking you so serious.
I am giving credit mostly to you and Dahlia, as I said before.
No, we give credit to you for your consistency with your integrity. I think that's what attracts people to you.
You have to go, but you and Dahlia put in Slate an article where I said Justice Kagan had to recuse from the Affordable Care Act.
Yeah.
Which most people thought if she did, then if she had, then it gets struck down. Because the lower court had struck it down and it would have been 4-4. And that moment in time, which you caused, because you had me and Dahlia on the show. Afterwards, Dahlia hung up, wrote me and said, write it up. I'll put it on Slate.
Oh, wow.
Really generous of her, because it was an anti-liberal thing. I mean, it was a very, in fact, Ian Millhauser wrote a response in Slate, castigated. We're not friends, but I mean, he castigated me for this idea.
Oh, good. Right, I agree with him. Yeah.
I'm right and he's wrong about this.
No, I think you're wrong still.
But no, I'm definitely right about Kate.
I have no idea, to be honest with you. I'm just trying to be a jerk.
But I will say, Pete, there are two things that have happened to me. I have a relationship with your audience that I really love. So I'm just going to be as open.
They really love you. Yeah. My dad really loves you.
I never, ever thought I would be invited to something like I'm going to tomorrow with Harvard, Yale.
Wow.
It was something, but more importantly, I have never, it freaks me out every time. It never has stopped freaking me out. I meet people in these places and they go, hey, I'm a big fan. And I'm like, you're a big fan of Pete Dominic. You're just kind of like me. I mean, the idea that I have fans is the most bizarre thing.
Well, let me ask you about just that. No, I got to go get Jules, as you know. But how do you given your kind of credibility gains and newfound respectability that you deserve, how do you deal with that with the ego? You go to this, you're invited to this conference, you're in front of this audience. People do recognize you. Do you need it? Do you like it? Does it feel good to be loved?
Until 6 months ago, my goal with Lynn, my wife, and my good friends was I said to them, I'm going to stay grounded and you keep me grounded because I'm getting an ego and I don't want it.
Oh, really?
So, yeah. I think the hoity-toity, so there are a few progressive hoity-toity law professors who agree with me. The court's not a court. Now, they didn't agree 10 years ago, but they agree now. But 99% do not. But I think they think that I've made an argument that is original and not stupid. And making an argument that's original but not stupid in con law is almost impossible because everything's been written.
That's the crown right there. That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
Pete, I get it. I'm very proud of that book. I am very proud of that book.
Supreme Myths?
Yes, I am very proud of that book. I said something no one's ever said before, and it's not stupid.
Maybe that is, I love that. I love that that's what you're drawing the confidence from and the satisfaction from, because I think that's true probably of most people in a lot of different careers, certainly in art.
I was true to myself in that book. It took me 20 years to do it, but I was true to myself.
Yeah, you were. You were ahead. You're way ahead of the curve. Look at us now.
But I want your audience to understand. I said it before. I'll say it until you and I stop doing this. My career would be very different without you, and that's a fact.
Well, that mine would be without you as well.
No, I don't think so.
Oh, yes. Who else? Who has been both my con law expert that I could go to and always had these types of conversations with?
Dahlia does your show all the time.
Who would also be the kind of friend you've been to me? Nobody.
Well, back at you, buddy.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you very much. Good luck at the conference, and text me and let me know how it goes.
I will.
All right, there you go, everybody. Eric Segall. I hope you liked it and the news, and thank you very much for listening today. Hopefully I'll get a show up on Saturday. It might be a little late because I'm going to be in the city all day taping these 2 television panels. I hope you watch MSNBC. It'll be 11th hour, and the Dan Abrams show, I think, is on at 9 on News Nation. You can find your pal Pete on both of those programs. I hope you have a great weekend. If I don't talk to you, thanks very much for showing up at the Hangout last night, and have an awesome weekend. Love you very much. I appreciate your support. Can't do it without you, and I will talk to you when I talk to you. See you in Vegas, March 22nd and 23rd. John Carroll, take us out.
When you can't see the forest for the burning trees, you got to stand up. Hey, you've been sitting so long, you got the creaky knees, you got to stand up. Stand up. I think you're driving wheels with leaking grease. Boy, you better stand up. Stand up. Well, there's a whole lot more of us who know what's right. They'll keep right on ignoring us if we keep sitting tight. You got to open up the window to let in some light. You got to stand up. That's right. You got to rise up. You got to stand up. You got to stare the devil straight in the eye. Let him know it's his turn to go. See it clear when all you hear is a lie. Don't get up off of your butt, get down off of your fence. Even if it ain't a very friendly audience, well, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense. And you stand up, stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town. Just stand up, stand up. You know they can't deny what you're laying down. Oh, you better stand up. Stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. This is the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up. Stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up. They had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of the stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't in sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change would begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. All right, we got to speak up, we got to reach up, and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up. Oh, got to stand up. Ooh, come on, just stand up. Everybody got to stand up. In the darkest hour, stand up. People got the power. Stand up. Come on, come on, come on. Come on, come on, come on. Come on, come on, come on. Stand up.